Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 144. That's 12 times 12. I don't know why this came to my mind. I'm here with Gustavo Barahona-López. It's a pleasure to have him. And here's a little bit about him. He's a writer and educator from Richmond, California. In his writing, Barahona-López draws from his experience growing up as the son of Mexican immigrants. His micro chapbook, Where Will the Children Play, was part of the Ghost City Press 2020 summer series. He was a finalist for the 2021 Quarterly West Poetry Prize. A member of the Writers Grotto and a VONA alum, Barahona-López's work can be found or is forthcoming in Iron Horse Literary Review, Puerto del Sol, The Acentos Review, Apogee Journal, Hayden's Ferry Review, among other publications. Gustavo, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's
Oh,
a huge honor.
oh man, it's an honor to have you. I just swimming in your work, just having read it, the last couple of days, and there's a reason why you've won these awards, these finalists, and more to come. In seeing the name of your micro chapbook, is that a Cat Stevens reference?
No, it's actually a Mana reference, like a
Ah,
translated title of one of their songs, "Donde jugarán los niños."
oh, okay. Is that from their Unplugged? Did they do that one on Unplugged?
I don't recall, but
Okay. My jam is Los Desaparecidos.
los de paz, yeah.
And saying that is, I don't mean to make light. That's about like the disappeared and such, but that's
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
great song, man. Okay, so from Mana, nice. I would like I said, honored to have you. I'd love to know about growing up. You grew up in Richmond, California, probably an hour and a half here or so from Sacramento here in the Bay Area. I wonder about, I'll throw a lot at you here, but just like language, did you grow up, completely bilingual? Was it mostly English? Was it mostly Spanish? And just kind of like just stories and how did the written word come into play as when you were a kid?
Yeah, so both of my parents are immigrants from this like little town in Michoacan called
Okay, Viva
Tatachel.
Michoacan. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so they're both from the same little town, and so they knew each other actually growing up before they eventually got married.
Oh wow.
It's like they both independently migrated to the United States, and then they met up back in Mexico at a dance.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then started dating. But yeah, so growing up, my mom had a greater command of English, but my dad was like I think by choice in
Mm,
part, like largely spoke Spanish,
mm-hmm,
and was um, very keen on us knowing Spanish and being able to talk to him,
mm-hmm.
to the point where he would like ban English at the dinner table and stuff like that. Yeah, so I grew up speaking Spanish, and then I actually went into bilingual education.
Mm,
Like my elementary school was Spanish English bilingual. Um, so through fourth grade, like my entire experience
mm,
was
okay.
bilingual. And my mom says that I didn't like master English until like fifth grade.
Mm,
So it took me a minute.
mm,
Since so much of my life was in Spanish, but now most of my life has is in English, and I think in English, even though I'm a Spanish immersion teacher,
mm,
third grade teacher now, but
mm,
most of my life is in English now.
mm,
And I think I mentioned in a couple of poems, like, oh yeah, like I remember dreaming in Spanish, especially when we had gone back to Mexico.
mm,
Um, and that hasn't been the case of late,
mm.
um, but I think Spanish has always been and continues to be like a really integral part of my life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. What were you reading? What was being read to you? What were the stories you're hearing? I guess what got you into poetry right away, or were you into like fiction? Were you into comic books? Like what were you reading when you were a kid?
Well, I think a lot of it probably stems from my dad because he was like a huge storyteller.
Mm,
He always loved like talking to like older folks because they had like the most interesting stories to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would recount those or like some of his own and like modified versions of like the 40 Thieves or like
Okay.
I don't know, like different like tall tales and stuff. So
Mm.
he was always very interested in telling stories and having conversations with all sorts of people. So I think um I think a lot of my desire to tell stories comes from that. And in terms of reading, I was always really into like fantasy and in high school like
Mm-hmm.
sci-fi in particular, and to some degree poetry. Um, so I read like Jurassic Park. Oh yeah,
Mm.
and oh, and in seventh grade, like I read I think in my classroom library there was like The Hobbit or whatever, and I read
Okay.
The Hobbit.
Okay.
And then I went to the library and I was like, and asked the librarian, is there something kind of similar to this, like that I could read? And then she's like, oh, like you don't even know. And like point me towards like the like Lord of the Rings trilogy and everything.
uh,
Yeah. So a lot of and Dune, no, there's like that movie,
okay.
so I read that too.
Yeah.
Um, and but in high school, I was lucky enough to be able to take like a Latino lit class. So a lot of poets. Um, actually, was lucky enough to like meet Martin Espada
Oh,
in
wow.
high school. He came to do a talk. And Jane Hirschfield actually as well
Oh,
too.
okay.
She also came to my high school. And then I was always in love with the words of like Federico Garcia Lorca and Emily Dickinson um, and Neruda
Okay.
were some of those influences.
When you're talking about your dad being such a great storyteller, were these, maybe recounting or his own tall tales? Were these like incredibly hyperbolic? Was he the hero of the story? Was he like a side character? All the above? Like,
Yeah. Oftentimes he was like the main character. He was
mm-hmm.
like the mythical beings, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak.
Mm.
Like and I referenced one of those stories in one of my poems. Like he talked about uh being in this lake and then out of nowhere there's like his huge whirlpool
Yeah.
that starts like sucking him into the middle of the lake. And then he talks about how like he prayed to God and then like it gave him like superhuman strength and was able to
Mm.
like allowed him to like or he credited it with like saving his life, so or his faith
Yeah.
saved his life. So it was definitely um other stories kind of like similar to that where there's like an epic ness to them.
Yeah. What have you ever played like armchair psychologist when like talking about reading like fantasy and sci-fi? Is it just you like them, or is it like, man, it was an escape, or it was a way to, see different worlds, or it was safe, or yeah, I don't know. Have you ever kind of done any armchair psychology on that?
I think my childhood was very like constrained in a lot of ways, like other than like academic pursuits, usually it was just like staying at home,
Okay.
mostly, and that was largely because my dad didn't like leaving the house
Mm-hmm.
and like for us to be there as well. So it in many ways was kind of an escape, like imagining what could be possible. Like I
Mm-hmm.
could see myself as like the the hero of one of these stories, like oh, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting to explore other worlds or
Right.
explore these like or like um I'm less of a fan now, but like things like Harry Potter really appealed to me because it's like
Mm-hmm.
oh, like maybe I'm like actually gonna get that letter soon, like when I turn 11, and then
Mm-hmm.
I can become a really good wizard and not have to be constrained by the rules and of my father.
That didn't happen though.
Oh no.
Ah,
I think
man.
I think it got lost in the mail.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, exactly, man. You never know
Yeah.
with those postal. that postal service, man. Shoot.
Yeah.
Uh,
Those
as
owls.
I'm sorry,
Those owls.
right? The I wonder about ideas of like representation. You said you talked about the Latinx literature. What was
Hmm.
the class called exactly? I'm sorry, you said like
It was Latino literature was the name of
Latino
the class.
literature.
Yeah.
Like, was that something that you were like, oh man, I found this. I didn't know I was missing it, or was that something that you always knew you were missing, or how did that kind of work into ideas of representation?
I think I definitely knew then that I was missing it. I mean, in K through 12 education in general to this day, but probably more so then, is
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have very much representation when it comes to many ethnic minorities. And so getting to take that class was like not many of my class or my friends or people that I knew got a chance to take a class like that. And I think I was actually like a double major, American Studies and Political Science,
Mm-hmm.
um, double major in college, but my concentration was in Chicano studies.
Okay.
So like that lack of representation, that lack of like historical knowledge or understanding, like kind of propelled me to like seek it out at the college level, and then actually I started a PhD program in Chicano studies at UC Santa Barbara
Oh
as
wow.
well. So I was very much dedicated to the idea of knowing like my history, my family's history, and
Yeah. Who
um, yeah.
sorry, who for you are some of the titans, I mean, as you got into college, like you said, and beyond, just the name of the podcast, the chills at will, those lines that you can cite, those lines that you can repeat, those lines that you can bring up, at will. They give you the chills, like a great song or something like that. Not that you have to have it memorized, but
Yeah,
who are some
yeah.
of these titans? Who are some of these writers who you who just thrilled you, and kind of like the double thing where it's like, dang, that's unbelievable, and like, how does somebody do that? Like in awe.
I think um well um like Alurista's poem, and now I'm gonna blank on it, of course. Um what's it called? Yo soy Joaquin.
Okay, not
Is
familiar
one
with
of
it.
those. It's this like the epic poem where like it was one of the kind of like anthems of the Chicano movement almost.
Mm,
Where it talked about like indigeneity and like the conquest and like the struggle of the Mexican people
mm,
throughout history and Chicano people throughout history.
mm,
So that was always something that is um I think foundational for kind of like Chicano studies um and yeah, the way that and the Chicano movement, it encapsulated a lot of the sort of mentality and desire um to expand like the greatness of marginalized people.
mm.
And then like more recently, like it like I've learned or like in seeing a lot of the critiques, like I can understand them more. But at the time of like college and graduate school, like Gloria Anzaldúa was a huge influence.
Okay.
Because I had it was my first time seeing um like a lot of things that I felt like represented on
Mm,
the page, right? So both through her poetry and more like kind of I feel like it was like kind of a hybrid work in many ways.
mm,
But like she has a section that talks about having like seven tongues and like in the
mm.
ways that in which code switching happens, like Tejano Spanish, like Mexican Spanish, like
Yeah, wow.
all these different like variation ways in which there are variations even within the languages and
Mm,
the combinations thereof. Um, so those concepts and those that way of thinking was also very influential to me.
Hmm.
And then I really, really love the work of Tomas Rivera.
Okay.
Like um, um, the Devour and the title of my book is kind of like an homage to like y no se lo tragó la tierra, like and the earth did not devour him.
Mhm.
Um, so it's yeah, again, it was like one of the first instances where I had ever seen Spanish, like my dad spoke Spanish, like my
Mm,
cousins and my uncles spoke Spanish, and my
mm,
mom. Um, and the types of like it's written in like vignettes, so like these tiny stories. So it's
mm.
so like there's like an overarching narrative, but it's almost like little cheesements, like
Okay.
little or it reminded me of like my mom telling me, it's like, oh, like, you know, like that your second cousin is like is getting married, or like this other person, like they had an accident and blah blah blah.
Okay.
So it kind of had that almost like collective like narrative
Mm.
aspect to it that um almost creates a collective consciousness for a
Oh.
community.
Does he have different narrators?
Um, if I recall, I can't remember if it's like primary. I think it's primarily in third person, if I'm remembering correctly, but I
Okay.
might be completely wrong on that.
Yeah. Well, no, so I appreciate that too. You know, I hear a lot, you know, in Spanish that el dragón, you know, he just ate three pieces of pizza in a minute. Dragón, dragón. So I
Mhm.
appreciate that, you know, that I guess the translation would be to devour, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Es más que comer, comer, pero tragar. So you
Mhm.
talk about from the Rivera poem, or from the Rivera title. I appreciate that. I think it's maybe UC Riverside has a Tomas Rivera Award
Mhm.
or department or
Yeah.
chair or something, you know, something to that effect.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, Darn it, you said something before that I was gonna pick up on, but anyways, so the you know, as we've gotten into more current times and as you read as a writer, you know, who are some of the other poets who really, I mean, you have a great list and the acknowledgments and people who helped you and you know with editing and such and revising or just with inspiration. But yeah, who are some of those people who are writing now, who are creating now, who really keep you going and impress you?
Mhm. I think Eduardo Corral is a huge inspiration. So yeah, Slow Lightning and Guillotine have been pretty key. Like
I hear
uh
his name a lot as an inspiration. Yeah,
yeah, definitely. And also Vanessa Angelica Villarreal is another poet that I really admire. Um,
he's incredible.
yeah, yeah. Beast Meridian is
Yeah, I don't. I think I still. I think it's up here somewhere.
yeah.
It's hiding behind Biggie, maybe. It's up there, one of those. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Alan Chasaro has been a huge
Oh man. Oh yeah.
like an influence and mentor as well. So I always appreciate him. And Mario Leon
Okay.
as well. She has yeah, she's also been a really fantastic mentor and um her like I write a lot about grief, and so I draw a lot
Hmm.
from her her conversation and like the reaching and longing that exists in her poems. Like she has this series of poems that all begin with like suppose,
Mm.
and then it's creating like alternate almost like alternate universes where like in her case like her dad doesn't pass away at an early age, and which was, I think it was just published in the New Yorker, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh wow. Okay.
But some of those poems from that series. So yeah, her work is amazing. Um, um, and then Marcelo Hernandez Castillo as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's doing the poem of the day. I think he's curating
Yeah,
that this
yeah.
month.
That's
So.
This
Yeah.
month, yeah. And not only his poetry collection, but also his memoir.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's a NorCal guy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, he blurbed the chapbook.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a heck of a list. I'm talking evolution. I don't mean evolution like Charles Darwin evolution, but evolution
Hmm.
comes up a lot in your work. And like, you talk about which hits so home. I don't know if that makes sense. Hit home for me with like the evolution of grief,
Hmm.
because it doesn't go away. It changes. It morphs. It's stronger one day and stronger one minute, and we are different.
Hmm.
But just going back to your studies, like, did you study a lot of like the history of Chicano like movement, in that, like, the evolution? If you would ask me like 20 years ago what I thought of when I heard Chicano, I would think of like politically active,
Hmm.
right? Like in the 60s and 70s, like Brown Power movement. And
Yeah.
then, I know some people will have see it as a negative. It's like the same as pocho, or it's the same as whitewashed, or whatever,
Hmm.
Americanized or whatever. I wonder what kind of how if you've seen like an evolution in the term Chicano, just in the way you've studied it, or how that maybe comes out in your work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
Kind of a
sense.
rambling question.
Yeah, I think I think you're right in that there's an association with, I mean, originally it was considered more of a prerogative term,
Okay.
um as far as I understand it, but then it was kind of reclaimed as a like source of pride,
Mm-hmm.
vindicate, like you said, brown power, trying to trace back roots. I was whenever I would start like one of the like Chicano history 101 classes, I would talk
Mm-hmm.
about how like it's not this degree now, but there's a time when Mexican was considered a dirty word, and
Mm.
part of the, like reclaiming the word term Chicano was trying to reconnect it back to kind of like the former glory of like the Aztec Empire, and like
Mm-hmm.
trying to get to those, or the Mayan empires, and like those um like kind of acknowledging the successes and technological advancements
Mm-hmm.
and genius of that of our historical lineage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so actually, I in college I asked one of my professors, it's like, I don't know if I can call myself a Chicano, and then it was because I didn't feel like I wasn't enough of an activist
Uh,
at the time, and then he kind of gave me an answer like it's like constantly changing term, like you
mm,
can um like it's already morphed throughout history,
mm,
and it'll continue to change,
mm,
but I think I think that part of my work is um kind of like complicating what the experience of being Mexican American is,
mm.
just,
Purposely complicating.
yeah, purposefully
Yeah.
complicating,
Uh-huh.
or like um kind of talking about like the nuances and the diversity within the
Mm-hmm.
community,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes, or like the Chicano movement did so many wonderful things and opened so many doors, but part of it was also like there's kind of like a homogenizing effort, like in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, like certain people could be considered part of it, but then others were not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really concerned with the kind of like losses of heritage, of the losses of connection to indigeneity,
Mm-hmm.
um because I was even as I was learning about it in like college, and even as I was trying to like, it's like hone in on, it's like, oh, like Huitzilopochtli and Coatlicue, like they're like so incredible, and like
Mm-hmm.
and everything, but it always was uncomfortable for me to claim them
Mm.
because my family didn't have um like any like any sort of those indigenous practices, other than, I mean, like there's there's an argument that like the Virgen de Guadalupe, for example, in many ways was like combined with Guadalupe, and that's
Okay.
how it was accepted as a figure, or she was accepted as a figure. But um I didn't um but I didn't feel that I could claim indigeneity, right? Or
Uh-huh.
claim a direct connection to indigeneity, like many more recent immigrants and children of
Mm.
immigrants can. And that's a loss. That's a type of loss, right? It's not that I don't want to be connected to it, or it's not
Mm-hmm.
um that I look down on it or in any shape or way or form
Right.
anyway, but um I feel uncomfortable claiming it
Mm.
as my own. And yeah, so I yeah.
Well, one of the lines from one of the poems, and we're talk about the book, kind of transition to that is one of the lines was, quote, used to obsess over Aztec deities as if they could quell my hunger for place. All right, you were just talking about the we potli. Did I say that correctly?
Huitzilopochtli.
We see Pochli, and just I mean, first of all, that's a bar right there. That's a great line, right? But there's a lot there about bilingualism, and even to say bi, I mean, like you said, try or whatever for is qua. This idea of like multiple languages was the Purepecha, the Spanish, there's it's not just bi culture, and like you said, it's just so many subtleties and nuances.
Hmm.
But that comes through for sure. This idea of the Chicanismo, if you will. You referenced, sorry, help me with her, Gloria Andaluza,
Gloria and Saldua.
Ansaldúa. And I know you reference, you write about Nepantla, and she writes
Hmm.
about that. Vanessa Angelica Villarreal writes about that beautifully, about this in between land, right?
Hmm.
Is that an oversimplification of Nepantla?
Yeah, it's kind of like a liminal space,
Uh
and
huh.
yes, yeah.
Okay. All right. If anybody at home is playing a drinking game, anytime a poet says liminal, right? Take a shot. But so there's that in between, and I think it's maybe it's third or fourth poem in the collection, maybe even earlier, is called "Convivir" does not mean to live together. That's the title,
Hmm.
and I love that this idea of like, things don't translate one for one, right?
Hmm.
It's, quote, to be present, the community breaking bread together. You reference how goal in English and goal, GOL. The first one's weak, and the latter one is an experience, right? The difference between a güera, maybe a light skinned blonde, Latina or Mexicana, versus the gringo who, that was great when you said, tried to say said two phrases and wanted praise, kind of thing. Um, you know, always apt, but this idea of like the person who's come across the border as a survivor, he deserves a towel, he deserves a place to relax, versus the way that's often shown in the media and such, right?
Hmm.
And just about trips to Mexico, and again, and I don't want to say it's you, but the speaker, you can say what you want about that, but trips to Mexico, you write about prayers that are uneven because you don't know the God's names, the languages being imposed and forgotten. And I'm rambling here, but just the idea of like how the languages are different. They're not exactly the same. There's not a one for one translation, and this idea of maybe being self conscious at times, right? Of not
Hmm.
knowing this, not knowing that. I wonder how much biculturalism, bilingualism was on your mind as you wrote this collection.
I think it very much was part of it. Um, there it's funny because like there are certain poems that I could only write in Spanish.
Mm,
Like there's one poem and I think we're gonna talk about it a little bit later, but Mi padre es el más fuerte del mundo.
yes.
So originally I had I wrote it in Spanish, but I had translated it for the collection
Mm-hmm.
for accessibility and everything, but then it just it didn't hit the same.
Mm,
Like it didn't do the work that I wanted it to do in
mm-hmm.
English, and so my editor for this collection, Reina Leon, did the kindest thing and gave me permission to not include it.
Mm.
It was like, yeah, if it's not doing the work, if it's not doing what you want, then you don't need to include it. Like
There you go.
some people are not going to have are not going to be able to access it in the same way, but it's your collection. It's how you want to communicate, and it was very
Mm-hmm.
important to me to have that be in Spanish because that moment was very much like in like that's how I was thinking about it. That was